I want to go back to South Carolina. Is that what you mean by taking a punch? And were you surprised by what happened in South Carolina with Bill Clinton?
Well, I would actually start with New Hampshire, where we thought going into it that we were going to, every poll had us up 10, and we ended up losing that night. And I think a lot of people thought, well, that broke his momentum, and maybe this thing is not for real. And I remember making a speech to some of my supporters that night and saying, you know what? This is not a bad thing, because we have to remind ourselves that changing the status quo is never easy. And we shouldn't think that just because we won in Iowa, or I gave an inspirational speech, that somehow change comes about that way. You've got to earn it. You've got to fight for it. And I think we've been earning it throughout this contest. Consistently, I think people have assumed that somehow there's going to be this point where the Clintons knock us out, and it doesn't happen. We're still here.
I want to move on, but have there been low blows thrown against you by either Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton?
I'll leave that up to the pundits to make a decision about it.
All right, then. Senator, you were ranked recently by National Journal as having the most liberal voting record of any senator in 2007. That prompts a question from Politico reader Don Mausch of Norwell, Massachusetts, who wants to know why that liberal record should give us confidence that you would reach across the aisle and get things done in Washington.
Well, first of all, not to grouse against the National Journal, but let me give you an example of one of the reasons I was rated as the most liberal was because I wanted a office of public integrity that stood outside of the Senate and outside of Congress to make sure that you had an impartial eye on ethics problems inside of Congress. Now, I didn't know that that was a liberal Democratic issue. I thought that was a good government issue that a lot of Republicans out there would like to see. So that's the problem with some of these ratings. How they score things uses categories that don't make sense to, I think, a lot of Americans.
Well, are you proud of that designation? Are you proud to be known as the most liberal voting senator?
I don't think you heard what I just said, which is that the designation is based on criteria that don't make sense to the American people.
It's been an issue for Democrats. Michael Dukakis said, yes, I'm proud to be a liberal. Bill Clinton said, no, the party can't cast itself as liberal.
But
are you comfortable with the liberal?
This is all old politics. This is the stuff that we're trying to get rid of. Because the problem is when we start breaking down into conservative and liberal, and we've got a bunch of set predispositions, whether it's on gun control or it's on health care, any attempt to do universal health care as socialized medicine, any discussion about taxes ends up being, are you raising them or lowering them, as opposed to the question I ask, which is, are we raising them for high-income individuals that can afford it and lowering them for low-income and middle-income people who really need help? Those old categories don't work, and they're preventing us from solving the problems that the American people want to see solved.
Senator, I've got a question that goes right to that. The likely Republican nominee, Senator McCain, has regularly stood up against his own party and has some real scars that he's wearing because of it when he thought it was in the national interest to do so. Name some issues where you would be willing to stand up against your party and also take those scars.
Well, look, right now I've talked about education. We actually had a roundtable here about what we need to do with the schools. And I've consistently said I think we need to support charter schools. I think it is important for us to experiment in terms of how teachers are compensated, working with teachers, but looking at how we can reward excellence in the classroom.
Have labor teachers' unions been an impediment to that kind of reform?
What I will say is they haven't been thrilled with me talking about these issues. And my sister's a teacher, so I'm a strong supporter of teachers, but I'm not going to be bound by just a certain way of talking about things in order for us to move forward on behalf of our kids. And I think a lot of teachers want to talk about how we can continually improve in performance. But the broader point is that we've got to get beyond a lot of the traditional categories. And in terms of reaching out across the aisle, one of the things that you've seen, I think, over the years that I've been in the Senate is my work with people like Tom Coburn on opening up and creating more transparency in government, making sure that every dollar of federal government spending that's out there, that's posted on a searchable database. That's not a conservative issue or a liberal issue. If you're a progressive, you need to be worried about how the government is spending its money, because we don't have enough money to spend on the things like early childhood education that I think are so important.
Well, let me give you a chance to be more of a maverick then. Is there any one issue that the Democratic Party itself is out of step with the mainstream of America in terms of where the country wants to go or where it needs to go? Is there a position that you want your party to change right now?
Well, you know, I think that the Democratic Party is a big tent, and so there are a bunch of different positions that I might not agree with. So I mentioned one. I think that on something like charter schools and experimenting with our school system to make it work, I think that's something that we really have to pay attention to. I think that, you know, when it comes to issues of trade, I think it is important for us to be in favor of trade, but I also think that it is important for us to make sure that we are putting in place the labor standards and environmental standards and safety standards that are going to provide some of a fighting chance for American workers. Now, some people in the Democratic Party believe that, some people don't. What I want to do is try to unify the two wings of the Democratic Party. What's considered the more progressive wing of the party, what's considered the more centrist wing of the party. I think that, you know, we can craft a approach that is pro-American, pro-worker, pro-business, pro-growth, and is not caught up in some of the ideological battles that have consumed us for the last 20 years.
Senator,
short on time.
Sure, Senator, we shouldn't have this conversation without talking about the biggest issue abroad, which is Iraq.
Right.
Will you use every tool in our country's arsenal to prevent civil war in Iraq after troops are pulled out, including, if necessary, putting troops back in?
Well, what I've said is that if we are doing this right, if we have a phased redeployment where we're as careful getting out as we were careless getting in, then there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to prevent the wholesale slaughter that I think some people have suggested might occur. And part of that means we're engaging in the diplomatic efforts that are required, not just within Iraq with the Shia, the Sunni, and the Kurd, but also in the region, talking to friends like Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Jordan, but also enemies like Iran and Syria. They have to have buy-in into that process. And we have to have humanitarian aid now. We already have 2.5 million displaced people inside of Iraq and several million more outside of Iraq. We should be ramping up assistance to them right now. But I've said consistently that I always reserve the right, in conjunction with a broader international effort, to prevent genocide or any wholesale slaughter that might happen inside of Iraq or any place else, if that's in the long-term interest of the United States of America.
All right, we just have time for one more question.
Go ahead.
This may be the hardest hitting question we've had to ask you today.
Go ahead.
Have you really gone cold turkey quitting smoking?
You know, it has been tough, but that Nicorette has worked out. I'm not sure that qualifies because
is that cold turkey if you're still getting nicotine?
Exactly. You're supposed to have phased out on that. Haven't completely. I'm still chewing that stuff.
You don't use the patch, though.
But you know, the patch I was a little more worried about.
And you don't steal smokes.
You know, I don't. The truth is that I wasn't. This was a nasty habit, but it wasn't a heavy one. So I didn't get the shakes or anything like that. So.
Well, we're glad you survived to tell the tale, Senator Barack Obama.
It's been
a pleasure.
I enjoyed it. Appreciate you guys.
And we're out of time now, so make sure you watch ABC 7 News. We will have all the latest results on the Chesapeake primary, and we'll see you there at 11.